Right now, you're wearing clothes. So obvious, you probably never even think about it. But here's a question almost nobody asks. When exactly did humans start doing this? You'd think archaeologists could just dig up ancient clothing and check. But there's a problem. Cloth doesn't survive. It rots. It disintegrates. It vanishes within decades, let alone thousands of years. So how do scientists know when humans first started wearing clothes? The answer is disturbing. They didn't study fabric. They studied lice. Tiny parasites living in your hair right now were used to solve one of the strangest mysteries in human history. And what they discovered doesn't just tell us when clothing began. It reveals something deeply unsettling about why. Because the real reason ancient humans started covering their bodies wasn't simply about staying warm. It might be far stranger than that. Let's start with something most people don't know. Humans used to be covered in hair, just like our ape relatives. But around 1 million years ago, or possibly even earlier, something changed. Early humans started losing their body hair. Scientists studying skin pigmentation genetics traced this shift. The leading theory is simple. Humans were moving into hot savanna environments. Thick body hair trapped heat. Losing it allowed early humans to sweat more efficiently, keeping cool while running, hunting, and traveling long distances under the African sun. So humans became a mostly hairless species. But here's where it gets strange. If humans lost their hair because it was too hot, why would they need clothes at all? Logically, clothing should only appear once humans started moving into colder regions. So scientists assumed clothing must have developed alongside human migration out of Africa into colder parts of Europe and Asia. But when researchers finally calculated the actual timeline, the numbers didn't match. Humans, it turns out, were walking around naked and hairless for an enormous stretch of time, possibly hundreds of thousands of years. No fur, no clothes, no protection, exposed. And the method scientists used to figure out exactly when this changed is one of the strangest techniques in all of archaeology. Here's where the disturbing part begins. Since clothing itself doesn't survive in the archaeological record, researchers needed another way to date its origin. A geneticist named Mark Stoneking had an unusual idea. Look at lice, specifically body lice. Here's the key biological fact that makes this work. Head lice live exclusively in human hair, feeding on the scalp. Body lice are different. They can only survive by living inside clothing, feeding on skin through fabric. Without clothes, body lice simply cannot exist. They have nowhere to live. This means body lice could not have evolved as a separate species until humans started wearing clothes regularly, so researchers compared the DNA of head lice and body lice. By calculating how long ago these two lice species genetically diverged from a common ancestor, they could pinpoint roughly when clothing first appeared. The logic is almost perfect. If body lice split off from head lice 170,000 years ago, that means clothing must have existed by that point. Otherwise, body lice would have had nowhere to live and never would have evolved at all. Using this method, a team at the University of Florida, led by researcher David Reed, calculated their results. Modern humans started wearing clothing regularly around 170,000 years ago. Other independent lice studies estimated the date slightly differently, somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. Either way, the method worked. A parasite living in your hair right now helped solve a mystery that left no physical trace in the ground. Now here's where this story takes a strange turn. If clothing was invented to survive cold weather, you'd expect clothing to appear right before humans migrated into colder climates. That's the obvious assumption, but the data tells a different story. According to the lice research, humans started wearing clothes around 170,000 years ago. Migration into colder regions of Europe and Asia didn't begin until roughly 100,000 years ago. That's a gap of about 70,000 years. Let that sink in. Humans were wearing clothes for 70,000 years, while still living in the relatively warm climate of Africa. If clothing was purely about surviving cold weather, this timeline makes no sense. So what was actually happening during those 70,000 years? Some researchers, including archaeologist Ian Gilligan, have proposed a different explanation. Clothing may have first emerged not as a response to cold, but as a response to instability. Around this time period, Earth's climate was going through dramatic swings. Ice ages were intensifying. Temperatures were fluctuating unpredictably across generations. Even in Africa, certain regions experienced unexpected cold snaps and harsh seasonal shifts. Clothing, in this theory, wasn't invented for one specific climate. It was invented as a flexible survival technology, something humans could adapt and improve over time, long before they actually needed it for true Ice Age conditions. In other words, humans didn't wait until they desperately needed clothing to invent it. They developed the technology early, almost as insurance against an uncertain future. This single decision, made roughly 170,000 years ago, may have been one of the most important survival innovations in human history. Because once humans had clothing, something remarkable became possible. Clothing didn't just keep people warm, it unlocked the entire planet. Without clothing, humans were biologically restricted to warm climates, the only regions their hairless bodies could survive in long term. But with clothing, humans suddenly had a portable climate control system, insulation they could create, adjust, and improve based on their environment. This is likely why clothing appeared roughly 70,000 years before humans actually needed it for cold survival. It wasn't a reaction to an immediate crisis. It was a head start. By the time humans began migrating out of Africa into colder regions around 100,000 years ago, they already had the technology required to survive the journey. Evidence supports this timeline in other ways too. Tools suitable for scraping animal hides, an essential step in making clothing, date back as far as 780,000 years ago. Eyed needles, used for actually sewing fitted garments, appear in the archaeological record around 40,000 years ago. This suggests clothing technology evolved gradually over an enormous span of time, starting with simple draped hides and eventually becoming sewn, fitted, layered garments. Without this slow technological buildup, humans may never have successfully migrated into Europe, Asia, and eventually the freezing landscapes of Siberia and the Arctic. Clothing wasn't just fabric, it was the key that unlocked human expansion across the entire globe. Every cold climate humans live in today, every country with snow, every population descended from those early migrants, exists because of a survival technology invented tens of thousands of years before it was even necessary. This story reveals something deeper about human nature. We often assume innovation happens out of desperate necessity, that humans only solve problems once they're forced to. But the clothing timeline suggests something different. Humans developed crucial survival technology decades, or even tens of thousands of years, before they actually needed it. This wasn't reactive, it was proactive. Early humans were essentially preparing for a future they hadn't yet experienced. That's a remarkably sophisticated survival strategy, and it raises an uncomfortable question about us today. Modern humans tend to wait until crisis hits before adapting. We see warning signs, we see early data, and often we delay action until the consequences are already unavoidable. But for tens of thousands of years, our ancestors did the opposite. They built solutions before the problem became urgent. They didn't wait for the Ice Age to force their hand. They prepared early, and that preparation is the reason humans now live on every continent on Earth, in every climate, from deserts to the Arctic Circle. The species that once lost its body hair to survive the heat eventually conquered the cold too, not through luck, through foresight. And it's worth asking, what early signs are we ignoring today that our ancestors might have already started preparing for? So here's the question this leaves us with. If early humans could prepare for climate challenges tens of thousands of years before they hit, using nothing but animal hides and basic tools, why do modern humans, with all our technology and data, so often wait until it's too late? Is foresight something we've lost along the way, or did our ancestors simply get lucky with one crucial invention? Let me know what you think in the comments. And next time you put on a jacket, remember that simple piece of clothing might be one of the most important inventions in human history. If this changed how you see something as simple as a t-shirt, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like if your mind was blown, and share this with someone who definitely overthinks their outfit choices. Every week, we dig up the strangest secrets hiding in human history. See you in the next one.